All right, howdy historians, Mr. Montgomery. So as we get started today, I know some classes were able to finish up the election of 1860 all the way through. You can just kind of move through this a little bit. I know some classes didn't quite get through everything, so we'll just quickly wrap this up here, efficiently, quick, not rush quick. All right, so remember, Northern Democrats, the Democrats have split. We have Stephen Douglas. He's going to be running on a campaign of popular sovereignty and enforcing the fugitive slave law. Southern Democrats have John C. Breckinridge. He is going for annexing Cuba and, full send expansion of slavery because Dred Scott says that there can be no restriction on slavery. Lincoln and the Republicans are going on no expansion of slavery, land grants, pro-business tariff, internal improvements, transcontinental railroad. And then you have the Constitutional Union Party and John Bell, who are advocating for just enforcing the Constitution and keeping the country together in any way that they can. And then Lincoln walks in with a huge electoral win, but a much smaller popular vote. He only got 40% of the popular vote. And the map can be deceiving sometimes. Douglas got the second most amount of popular votes, but he received only 12 electoral votes. Then you can see how the rest plays out. So a very divided country and a very divided political map. A very divided country and very divided political parties because the parties were in crisis. Really, the Republicans were the only legit party that were really running a national campaign. Even though no one in the South was going to listen to them, they were at least organized. The split of the Democrats doomed them. It's some pretty simple math that you can look out there that they could have won. And honestly, the Constitutional Union Party was also pulling votes away from the Democratic base. So it's that election of 1860 that is the final straw. Everything that came with it is pushing the South towards secession. But the election of 1860 is the final straw that will eventually cause the secession of the first group of Confederate states, the formation of the Confederacy, then the opening shots at Fort Sumter, and then the last four states will secede as well and join the Confederacy. So you can see that in the picture in the upper left, this map. The states in the blue, those are going to be the 7 states that are the Deep South that are going to secede and form the Confederate States of America in February of 1861. The states in the lavender are going to secede after the opening shot. After the war starts, they're going to secede after the opening shots at Fort Sumter. And then the states in kind of the orange have slaves but never secede. They're going to be what we call the border states up here. They have slaves but they never secede. Excuse me. Ooh, little bubble there. Excusez-moi. And then the bottom, it's the same map, just 2 different ways. Right side, it's old school. Left side, it's new school, colorized. It's interesting, we definitely probably think, oh, sure, there were some people who didn't want to secede. But this map shows us that there were actually quite a few people in the South who did not want to secede. Everything kind of this green is the areas, the counties that were voting against secession. Everything in the mustard yellow, those are the areas that voted for secession. Now, obviously, they're a majority, right? And then the conventions were divided in that browny red color that we see there, and then some areas with no returns available. So there was some division there. There was definitely some division, but it was the election of Lincoln that was the final straw that got it started. So South Carolina was the first state to secede. They held a special secession convention. All of the delegates there unanimously voted to secede from the United States. Their defense of slavery, their disgust over tariffs, their disgust over Lincoln being elected, their want to, expand slavery and expand the slave power across the country outweighs their patriotism and their belief in the United States. And they have now left the United States, and they're hoping that other southern states are going to come along with them. So they're the first to go in December of 1860, just a month after Lincoln is elected. And eventually, 7 states will secede before the war starts. South Carolina, Florida, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, and Texas. South Carolina, Florida, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, and Texas are going to be the original states that make up the Confederate States of America. They got together in February of 1861. They met in Montgomery, Alabama, and there they formed the Confederate States of America. They elected President Jefferson Davis of Mississippi, a Vice President Alexander Stephens of Georgia, and their Constitution looks almost identical to the Constitution of the United States of America, except that it placed limits on the government's power to restrict slavery and impose tariffs. Shocker, right? So this is the early Confederate States of America. These states operating under a constitution, no restrictions on slavery, no power to impose tariffs. Jefferson Davis is president. Alexander Stephens of Georgia is vice president. And now they're going to figure out what to do from there and try to gain some more members. Now, there is one last hope of compromise. What's weird at this time, the election is the first Tuesday in November. It's always in early November. So the election happens in November of 1860, but at this time, the new president didn't come in until March of the following year. So there's a 5-month lame duck period. Now, that will eventually change. There'll be an amendment to change that, but it's not happening right now. So James Buchanan is still in office in November, December, January, February, and parts of March as all of this is unfolding. And Buchanan wasn't doing anything. He basically said, this is Lincoln's problem. He can handle it now. There was one senator from Kentucky, John Crittenden of Kentucky. He tried to propose a constitutional amendment that would have allowed slavery in all territories south of the 3630 line. Right? So Crittenden is trying to basically prevent the war. Right? He's got this constitutional amendment, extend the 3630 line. There can be slavery south of that line, but not north of it. Hopefully this can just be the thing that keeps the country together. It would have been difficult to pass, but also Lincoln came out publicly and said that he would not accept that compromise because it violated his campaign promise and the Republican position against the extension of slavery. So he said, listen, I campaigned that slavery would not extend into new areas. The Republican Party's platform says there can be no expansion or extension of slavery, so I'm not going to allow this to happen. So it died pretty quickly. And now we have these states seceding and creating the Confederate States of America. And really, for those Southern whites who voted for secession and for the states who joined the Confederate States of America, they really believed that they were acting in the tradition and the spirit of 76. They felt that they were revolutionaries, just like our founding fathers were in 1776. They compared the North to the tyranny of King George III. They compared the restrictions to slavery to the restrictions to representative government and the right to representation. So they felt that they had the right to independence from the tyranny of the North. They felt that this was something that was heroic and patriotic. I mean, it's kind of ironic because you're starting a new country to erase the old, right? And eventually there's going to be a war over it. So, sometimes when people invoke the spirit of 76, it's justified. Many times it's not. And I would definitely argue, as most historians do, that this was not a time that the spirit of 76 was really in action. This was a selfish example of any type of exercising of rights, and it was over slavery, right? It was over an immoral issue that people around the world had also agreed was immoral. The United States was the last major country to still use slavery. We were way behind the 8 ball on that in comparison to our Western European counter-civilizations and democracies. Many people also justified secession by saying basically that the North would allow it to happen. Buchanan didn't do anything. For 5 months, Buchanan just allowed a secession to happen without a fight, without any type of hubbub, without any type of uproar. He didn't send troops. He didn't try to even stop it. He didn't even issue a statement or a letter. He just sat there quietly and allowed it to happen. So many people thought that justified their secession, and many people thought Lincoln would do the same thing. That Lincoln was just, talking a lot on the campaign trail, but he wouldn't actually do anything to try to keep the country together. But of course, they were terribly wrong. On April 12th of 1861, Southern guns will fire on Fort Sumter, and the Civil War will begin, which is what we'll look at in the next video. So go ahead and hop on over to that for Civil War Introduction Part 1. We'll look at the just kind of a general intro to the war, and then in Civil War Intro Part 2, we'll see the war actually begin with the firing and bombarding of Fort Sumter, and then the second wave of secession. All right, great job so far. Keep it up.